It was supposed to be an ordinary Sunday morning in Brooklyn. Coffee brewing, church bells in the distance, kids riding bikes down the street. Then, buzz. A notification. One phone, then another, then thousands. YouTube feeds lit up, timelines shook awake, barbershops and cafes turned their TVs toward a single live stream from West Africa. The broadcast was coming out of Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. But it wasn't the usual political performance with polished speeches and empty promises. No, this was something different. A voice, raw and unfiltered. A young soldier in simple fatigues, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, sitting in a bare room lined not with symbols of power, but with memory, old maps of Africa before it was carved apart, photographs of Sankara, Lumumba, even Malcolm X. For 40 minutes he spoke. And by the time he finished, black communities from Harlem to Havana, from Atlanta to Rio, were in tears. He began with the wound. The wound of slavery, of chains, of stolen mothers and erased languages. He did not sugarcoat it. You were dragged from this soil, he said, sold like cattle, stripped of your gods, your names, your tongues. But never think we forgot you. Africa was silenced, but Africa did not forget. He went further, cutting through centuries of guilt and distortion. He reminded the world that Africa did not simply sell itself. Kingdoms resisted. People fought. Betrayal was manufactured by European guns and false missionaries. They burned your names in the West, he said, but the rhythm in your walk, the drum in your chest, that is Africa still speaking. And people listening, whether in a Chicago barbershop or an Atlanta church basement, felt something stir. Something older than pain. Something alive. But Traoré didn't stop at history. He leaned forward, his voice sharpening. I am not here to tell you about the chains. We all know the chains. I am here to tell you, the chains are breaking again. And I want you to be part of it. He spoke of a revolution underway in the Sahel, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, nations clawing back their land, their gold, their dignity. They do not fear me because of weapons, he said. They fear me because I remind them of Sankara. And they fear you, not because you protest, but because of what happens when you and I stand side by side. Then came the moment no one saw coming. He announced that Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger would open their doors to the diaspora. A fast-track path to citizenship. Access to land. A stake in Africa's rebirth. You are not homeless in America, he said. You are landless. And land can be given back. The camera drew closer. His words became personal. To the young brother in Oakland who feels hunted by police, come and taste what it's like to walk without fear. To the mother in New Orleans teaching her children our history, bring them to the same soil where our ancestors prayed before the ships came. To the artist in Atlanta with power but no compass, come build studios here, shape the story from the motherland. And to the grandmother in Detroit still holding the memory of lynching and loss, your strength is sacred. We honor you. He even spoke to the stars, not with judgment, but with invitation. Beyoncé, Jay-Z, Kendrick, Rihanna, Oprah. Your power matters more here than it ever could there. Come home. By the time the live stream ended, the world was buzzing. But in barbershops, in churches, in living rooms across the diaspora, it wasn't buzz. It was silence. Reverence. A feeling that something long buried had just been unearthed. And the question on every lip was simple. Was this just a speech, or the start of something we never thought we'd see in our lifetime? The announcement had a name. Operation Sankofa, an ancient Akan proverb meaning, go back and fetch what was left behind. Traoré explained it plainly. Africa did not need charity. It did not need rescuers. What it needed were builders. Doctors, teachers, engineers, farmers, artists, sons and daughters of the diaspora willing to return, not as strangers, but as pieces of a broken mosaic finding their place again. You are not foreigners, he said. You are fragments returning to the whole. Africa is not paradise. We still bleed from poverty, corruption, and old wounds. But with you, everything changes. When the live stream ended, the silence was heavy. Sacred. In a cramped apartment on Chicago's South Side, Malik, a 26-year-old teacher, sat frozen, tears streaming down his face. In Atlanta, a retired veteran everyone called Uncle Joe whispered at the window, It's about time. In a Washington, D.C. dorm, a college sophomore named Amina began drafting an open letter titled, My Message to Ibrahim Traoré. Meanwhile, in Western media newsrooms, confusion reigned. CNN and the BBC brushed it off as symbolic rhetoric. But online, on Twitter, on YouTube, in Pan-African forums, the reaction was wildfire. Was this a dream? A trap? Or the moment generations had waited for? Within a week, the pushback began. Western outlets labeled Traoré a dangerous populist. Anonymous leaks accused him of destabilizing the Sahel. Sanctions followed, sharp and punishing. But he did not flinch. Let them come, he declared in a shorter, sharper video. We survived slavery. We survived colonialism. We survived coups. And we will survive sanctions. Because for the first time, we are not alone. Our brothers and sisters are listening. Then he extended an invitation. A call to action. Filmmakers, scientists, entrepreneurs, activists, diaspora sons and daughters were summoned to Ouagadougou for the first-ever Diaspora Congress, set for the year's end. Airlines soon filled with unlikely passengers. Young people sold their cars, quit jobs, applied for visas they'd never thought they'd need. A video went viral of Mama Ruth, an 82-year-old elder from Brooklyn, leaning on her cane at JFK Airport with a single suitcase. I may not have many years left, she said, but I need to touch that soil. And maybe plant a seed. Grassroots movements bloomed overnight. In the Bronx, youth launched a collective called Back to Build, where teenagers studied African history, learned economics, even practiced farming on borrowed lots. Of course, skepticism was there too. Some worried about false promises. Others warned against romantic illusions. But the fire had already been lit. By December, Ouagadougou was transformed. The airport buzzed with arrivals from every corner of the black diaspora. African Americans, Caribbeans, Brazilians, Haitians, black Europeans. Some came in colorful dashikis, others in jeans and hoodies, others in business suits. But everyone carried more than luggage. They carried a sense of purpose. The opening of the Congress was simple. No celebrity stages, no fireworks. Just a drumbeat. Elders poured libations into the earth, whispering prayers in Bambara, Yoruba, Wolof, Haitian Creole. And then Ibrahim Traoré walked into the arena. No bodyguards. Just a young leader in fatigues. The crowd rose, not with applause, but with silence. A silence so full it felt like the ancestors themselves were in the room. Then, as if on cue, thousands of voices broke into song, redemption song, carried on the wind like a prayer. When it faded, Traoré stepped forward. His words were steady, solemn. This is not a political summit. This is not a negotiation. This is a healing ceremony disguised as a gathering. And then, he unfolded a document he called the Sankofa Pact, written in many tongues, bound by a single promise, that the children of Africa, wherever they had been scattered, would never again be strangers on this earth. The Sankofa Pact was more than words on paper. It laid out a blueprint for how the scattered children of Africa could come home, not as conquerors, not as tourists, but as family. Land would not be sold, but leased, to prevent new forms of exploitation. Businesses would be built in partnership with local communities, not over them. Schools would weave local languages and diaspora history together, so the next generation could grow up knowing both Sankara and Malcolm, both Garvey and Nkrumah. This is not charity, Traoré told them. This is not about saviors. We are not looking for heroes. We are looking for builders. You are not outsiders. You are fragments returning to the whole. He also made clear, Africa was no paradise. Poverty, corruption, and wounds still ran deep. But now, for the first time in centuries, those wounds had hands reaching across oceans to help heal them. Inside the Congress, stories began to unfold. Dr. Asha Walker, a 34-year-old lawyer from Detroit, stood in a breakout session on law and justice. She had walked away from a successful firm after hearing Traoré's call. Her voice shook but did not break. I defended young men hunted like prey in America. I want to help write laws here so that no child ever needs a courtroom to prove their humanity. Then came Kojo Bantu, a reggae artist from Jamaica. He pledged to build a cultural studio in Bobo Dioulasso where diaspora and local musicians could craft new sounds together. A delegation from Brazil promised to send builders skilled in Afro-Indigenous techniques to help raise eco-villages from the red Sahel soil. And tech entrepreneurs, from Atlanta, Lagos, Nairobi, signed an unprecedented pact, an encrypted Pan-African communication network immune from Western surveillance. Traoré's voice echoed through the hall, "Africa must tell its own story, or live forever in someone else's." But outside that hall, storms gathered. Some within the Burkinabe military, trained under the old French order, muttered that Traoré was moving too fast. Whispers of discontent carried through Ouagadougou's streets. From Paris and Washington, the attacks sharpened. Smear campaigns flooded social media, photoshopped images, fabricated leaks, whispers of corruption, headlines branding him a cult leader. Exodus or delusion? The diaspora dream in danger, one Western paper sneered. Traoré met it with calm defiance. "They fear us not because we beg, but because we build. This is not a cult, it is a culture." Quietly, he acted. Volunteers from the diaspora, ex-military men and women from America, Jamaica, Ghana, Nigeria, were trained and organized. They called themselves the Sankara Guard. Their mission was not to serve him, but to protect the dream. Meanwhile, in the countryside, the dream was taking root, literally. Mama Ruth, the 82-year-old elder from Detroit, knelt in a cassava field alongside Burkinabe women. Her hands, once used to hand out food stamps, pressed seeds into African soil. "Before I die," she said, "I want to feed someone with my own hands." The women called her Maman Courage. She became a living symbol that return was not fantasy, it could be lived. Others followed. A jazz musician from New Orleans who opened a music school for village kids. A former Black Panther from Oakland teaching self-defense and dignity to local youth. Classrooms where children now learned the names of Garvey, Nzinga, and Shaka Zulu, alongside their math and science. Months later, as the sun bled across the horizon, Traoré stood on the rooftop of a government building. Below him stretched the glowing lights of a new community, Wami Town, built by diasporans and Burkinabe, side by side. A young man approached him quietly. Jamal, a software developer from Baltimore. His voice was low, almost hesitant. "Sir, you know they're going to try to kill you, right?" Traoré turned slowly, a soft smile on his face. "I know. But I also know this. You cannot kill an idea whose time has come." In the distance, a church bell rang. A muezzin's call rose from a new mosque built by black Muslims from Senegal and Detroit. And over the airwaves, the first broadcast of a Pan-African radio station crackled to life with words that would echo across oceans. "To all the children of Africa, no matter where you were born, welcome home." It was a cool Harmattan night in Ouagadougou when the city suddenly went dark. At first, people thought it was another routine blackout. But then the phones died, the radio cut out, and the presidential residence slipped into silence. The only light was the half-moon above, sharp as a blade in the sky. Inside his modest quarters, Ibrahim Traoré stood at the window, calm, almost expectant. Hours earlier, an anonymous message had flashed across a secure line: "They move tonight. Not foreigners, our own." The coup wasn't coming from Paris or Washington this time. It was coming from within. At 2:16 a.m., gunfire erupted at Camp Sango-Lamazana. Rogue soldiers, former allies, stormed the National Communications Tower, silencing state radio. Their plan was swift and brutal: remove Traoré, seize the capital, scrap the diaspora project, and promise France a return to stability. In exchange, they had been promised safe passage and silence. But they had not planned for the Sankara Guard. Led by Captain Ao Mensah, a Ghanaian-born former UN peacekeeper, the Guard had already intercepted chatter on encrypted channels. By the time the mutineers reached the presidential compound, 60 volunteers from across the Pan-African world stood waiting. Some were Burkinabe. Others were African-American veterans. Afro-Brazilians. Even 2 Haitians hardened in the streets of Port-au-Prince. They wore no uniforms, only armbands marked with the red, black, and green crest of a new Africa. Ao Mensah raised his fist. "No one enters. This gate is guarded by the ancestors." The firefight was short but vicious. 2 Sankara guards fell. 4 rebels were captured alive. The rest scattered into the night. Through it all, Traoré never left the compound. From a hidden transmitter beneath what used to be a French military base, he addressed the nation. They have tried to steal this moment. They have tried to drag us back into the past. But this is not 1966. This is not 1983. We will not be overthrown. We will overcome. The failed coup sent tremors across Africa. In Senegal, youth groups poured into the streets chanting his name. In South Africa, ANC veterans held a candlelight vigil, singing freedom songs from the apartheid struggle. In America, Black Twitter erupted with the hashtag Africa Still Rises. But inside Burkina Faso, the mood was mixed. In markets and mosques, whispers spread. Could Traoré truly protect the people? Was the diaspora project making them a bigger target? Fear crept in. Doubt took root. So Traoré called a closed-door meeting with his most trusted circle, Ayo Mensa, Dr. Asha Walker, Mama Ruth, and Kojo Bantu. We knew this day would come, he said. Our answer cannot be more bullets. Our answer must be deeper roots. Asha spoke first. Schools, clinics, food. If the people see change in their daily lives, they'll defend it with their lives. Kojo leaned forward, fire in his voice. And culture, music, film, stories. We have to move their souls, not just their stomachs. Mama Ruth placed her hand on Traoré's arm, smiling softly. Child, remember what I told you when I planted that cassava? No matter how much they step on the seed, if it's planted in good soil, it will grow. 3 months later, Traoré did something no African leader had ever dared. He delivered the first African State of the Union. Broadcast live across the continent and streamed to diaspora communities worldwide, it wasn't a staged press conference. It was raw truth. For 90 minutes, without a teleprompter, he spoke. He named the generals who had betrayed their people. He revealed files proving French complicity in the coup attempt. And most powerfully, he introduced families, mothers, fathers, children, who had returned from America, Haiti, Brazil, and the UK. Families now farming, building schools, raising children side by side with Burkinabe neighbors. This is not fantasy. This is not utopia, Traoré declared. This is justice. When his words finally settled into silence, it wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Africa, he declared, was not a minefield of resources to be carved up, it was a rebirth. And as he raised a wooden carving of Sankara high into the air, millions across the world felt the weight of that symbol. But the pushback came fast. Western networks lined up with their attacks. CNN, the BBC, even Le Monde aired documentaries branding Traoré a threat, calling him a radical who was militarizing Pan-Africanism, rallying young black voices into some shadow empire. A leaked CIA memo went further. He's more dangerous than Castro. He has a smartphone, and he knows how to use it. The African Union stayed silent. But ordinary people didn't. In Lagos, a 17-year-old coder built an app that stored every Traoré speech in half a dozen languages. In Atlanta, a spoken-word artist went viral with a poem called Dear Africa, I Heard You Calling. Afrobeat musicians across Accra, Lagos, and Johannesburg recorded a joint anthem, We Are Coming Home. From the Bronx to Brixton, murals began to appear. Traoré's face painted alongside Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey. And then came the letter. A barefoot boy carried it to him, written in trembling handwriting from Mama Ruth. My son, they may fear you, but I believe in you. I've never seen a man fight with such gentleness and still be heard across oceans. I'm old now, but I will live long enough to see this seed grow. When I die, plant my body in the soil of Africa. Let me feed the next generation. Tell them their grandmother chose Africa with all the love I carried from Detroit to Ouagadougou. And then, it happened. They started coming, not missionaries, not investors, not soldiers. Families. Black families from Newark and Kingston, from Johannesburg and Port-au-Prince, from Brixton and Bahia. They carried only passports, suitcases, and a word that burned like gospel on their lips, home. Burkina Faso's modest airports overflowed. Some came with dual citizenship, others with nothing but hope. They were nurses, teachers, truck drivers, coders, former prisoners, single mothers, grandmothers in wheelchairs, teenagers who had only ever known the sound of sirens and concrete walls. One morning, Traoré stood by the tarmac in his simple brown tunic and sandals. A grandmother from Atlanta stepped off the plane, bent down, and kissed the soil. He whispered, "We waited for you. And now you are here." 10 kilometers outside Ouagadougou, where 2 years earlier there had been nothing but bushland, a new village rose. Sankara Hills. Red dirt roads lit with solar lamps. Clay homes built with local hands and diaspora donations. A hospital for mothers and infants named the Malcolm Center. And at the heart, a school, Ubuntu Academy, where children learned in Diola, French, English, and Yoruba. Each classroom carried the name of a freedom fighter: Harriet Tubman, Amilcar Cabral, Kwame Nkrumah, Nanny of the Maroons. There were no fences. Locals and newcomers farmed together, argued together, celebrated together. Every Friday night under the great baobab tree, they held open forums. Sometimes, Traoré came too, unguarded, just another face in the circle of firelight. One night, a teenager from Baltimore asked him, "Why us? Why risk so much on people America threw away?" Traoré didn't pause. Because Africa is not charity. Africa is restoration. You were never thrown away, you were stolen. And now the stolen are choosing to return. That alone is revolutionary. But revolutions attract enemies. In neighboring Ivory Coast, an American base stirred with activity. A drone intercept leaked, a map covered in red dots. Each dot marked a place considered an ideological threat. At the center of the map, Sankara Hills. And in high schools in Ferguson, Missouri, Traoré's speeches were already being studied. Black enlistment in the U.S. military was falling. Something deeper was happening. Across America, black churches no longer sent donations to overseas charities or Israeli causes. Instead, collection plates filled to build wells, buy school books, and support children in a faraway place called Burkina Faso. And at the center of this shift stood one man. Ibrahim Traoré had become more than a leader. He was a symbol. To the powerful, he was a virus, a threat spreading too quickly to contain. A leaked Pentagon memo put it bluntly: neutralize the idea. Smear the man. Break the movement. And so, the storm began. One morning, headlines exploded across Western media. They claimed Traoré had secretly funneled millions in gold reserves into offshore accounts in the Seychelles. Photos showed him shaking hands with supposed Russian arms dealers. A voice recording surfaced in which he allegedly sneered, "Let the West burn if Africa must live." The internet caught fire. Commentators and politicians who once praised him now condemned him. The African Union demanded an investigation. Even some of his closest supporters wavered. In the markets and homes of Sankara Hills, whispers of betrayal spread like smoke. Families began to wonder if they had been deceived. But not everyone believed the story. A young Haitian journalist named Soline Moreau, working quietly from Bobo Dioulasso, dug into the evidence. What she found was devastating, not for Traoré, but for his enemies. The photos had AI fingerprints. The voice was a deepfake clone. She published a report under a single defiant headline: "You cannot kill the truth with a keyboard." Her exposé spread like wildfire. Black-owned media platforms amplified it, grassroots networks carried it, and before long the scandal unraveled. The lies were exposed. It had all been a trap. Yet the damage lingered. Some families left. Others grew cold. And Traoré himself grew quieter. Chapter 24. The disappearance 2 weeks later, he was gone. No speeches. No motorcade. No trace. Ibrahim Traoré had vanished. Rumors swirled: he's dead. He went underground. He's with the Dozo priests. He's hiding in Cuba with the ghost of Fidel. Then, out of nowhere, a grainy encrypted video appeared on a Liberation Network server. Traoré sat cross-legged on the floor of a mud hut. His beard was thicker, his eyes steady. "I had to disappear. To remind you this was never about me. If you believed this was my movement, then we failed. But if you know this is your calling, then the work continues. Africa is not waiting for one man, she is waiting for all her children. The next chapter is yours to write." The screen went black. The dry season grew harsher. The air in Ouagadougou trembled under a punishing heat. ECOWAS troops, backed quietly by the West, began to amass near Burkina's borders. Sanctions tightened. Food prices doubled. International banks froze every account they could. Foreign reporters whispered that the Burkinabe experiment was collapsing. But inside Sankara Hills, the people did not collapse. Diaspora engineers designed water systems from scraps. Local farmers taught returnees from Haiti how to cultivate millet. Afro-Brazilian nurses set up mobile clinics in villages. Each night, music, poetry, and drumbeats filled the air, defying fear. In the classrooms of the Ubuntu Academy, children wrote their own revolutionary texts. 10-year-olds debated Nkrumah and CLR James as if they were old neighbors. On the Academy's wall, someone painted a message in red: "You can exile a man, but not a message." Still, danger loomed. One night, a black military helicopter hovered low over Sankara Hills. Its loudspeakers blared in French, English, and Wolof: "Disband. You are enemies of democracy. Ibrahim Traoré is dead." But the signal was hacked. Suddenly, Traoré's voice thundered through the night sky: "I am alive. But my life or death is not the question. The question is, will you finally believe you are free? Or will you keep waiting for someone else to save you? If I return, it will not be to lead, but to witness you becoming what the ancestors dreamed." The crowd erupted. Men wept openly. Women raised their fists. Children clambered onto rooftops, shouting into the night, "Traoré lives!" In that moment, the revolution was no longer an idea. It was alive. The next morning, Ouagadougou awoke to something no one could have imagined. Hundreds of thousands filled the streets, not in anger, but in quiet, unstoppable resolve. Black flags bearing Sankara's face rippled in the hot wind. Drums pounded like a heartbeat. Barefoot elders sang the songs of their youth, voices cracking but unbroken. Students, disillusioned yet defiant, marched shoulder to shoulder with farmers, priests, clerics, and even nomads who had come down from the Sahel. And then came the children. A girl no older than 10 carried a hand-painted sign. It said simply, "We are not the future. We are the correction." When the ECOWAS convoy finally arrived, tanks rolling forward with foreign eyes watching from above, they expected chaos. But instead, they found the roads blocked, not by guns, not by barricades, but by women. Old and young, sitting cross-legged in silence, arms linked, refusing to move. The cameras broadcast it worldwide. African women, unarmed, standing between tanks and their children. And then it happened. A single armored vehicle reversed. Then another. Then another. The invasion dissolved, not by force of arms, but by the immovable courage of a people who had decided, enough. Weeks later, on the steps of the rebuilt Thomas Sankara Memorial, Ibrahim Traoré stood thinner, older, softer in voice, but sharper in truth. He gave what history now remembers as his final public address. "To my black brothers and sisters in America, in the Caribbean, in Brazil, in the UK, and beyond, you were never lost. You were taken. You were never weak. You were unarmed. And you were never forgotten. Africa has called your name through every drought, every war, every drumbeat. Come home, or build home where you stand. But remember this, your liberation will never be handed to you. It must be chosen, by you for you." And with that, Traoré stepped down from the podium. He did not return to the palace. He did not call for bodyguards. He walked into the crowd and vanished once more, not in fear, but in trust. Because the people were awake. And once awake, they could not be put back to sleep. A decade later, schoolchildren across the black world would open their history books and find the Burkina uprising described as the moment Africa stopped begging to be pitied and demanded to be respected. Traoré's face would live on, printed on T-shirts beside Mandela and Malcolm. His speeches quoted in classrooms, sung in songs, whispered in protests from New York to Kingston to Lagos. But in Sankara Hills, beneath the old baobab tree, there is no statue. No monument. Only a small plaque. It reads, "A man came. The people answered. The rest is up to you." And so it was.